comes to the media in Sweden, there's a kind of self-censorship. They are all overwhelmingly left-leaning. One study showed that of those working at the state-owned media, 8 out of 10 vote for the far-left Green Party. If you think CNN is bad, you haven't seen anything until you have seen Swedish media. That is a whole different league. In Sweden there is something known as the opinion corridor. If you step outside it, you're quickly shunned and called names. We do have a few alternative right-wing news sites like Fria Tider, but they aren't many. This is why so little information from Sweden is going out to the rest of the world. Thanks to alternative news sites in Sweden, and people like me and others, for example like Ingrid Carlqvist of the Gatestone Institute, the truth about what is happening in Sweden is beginning to come out, and more Swedish people are waking up. However, a recent study showed that over 70% of Swedes have a high trust in the state-owned media, and many are completely clueless of what is going on in their own country. Now, I will go through with you some of the worst incidents and give a glimpse of what is actually happening in Sweden since the migration crisis began. Obviously, one of the first things that comes to mind is the fact that Sweden is the rape capital of the world. In fact, Sweden has the second highest amount of rapes per capita after Lesotho in South Africa, according to the Gatestone Institute. And for anyone familiar with the situation, it is quite obvious it is not blue-eyed, blonde Swedes that are behind most of the attacks. Because of the censorship in Sweden, it is hard to know the exact statistics of the ethnicity of the people perpetrating the rapes, but according to some estimates, about 78% of the rapes are committed by migrants. According to the latest report from the official government institute on crime called BRÅ, there's been a 100% increase of sexual assaults in Sweden for the last 3 years. The same study showed that 31% of women are now afraid to go outside in the evening, and for 12% it is so bad that they don't go outside in the evening at all. And it is no wonder when you have incidents like this one that recently happened. 3 migrants, 2 of them so-called child refugees, drugged and then gang raped a Swedish woman for over 3 hours, and they all live streamed it on Facebook. It was only stopped after members of the public saw the stream and called the police, who then intervened live on camera. There was also the case of Mohammed, who claimed to be 17 but is known to be older, brutally raped a 13-year-old girl, both front way and behind, in a school toilet. And since he claimed to only be 17, he got just 2 months in prison. Another horrible incident, which happened in October 2016, was that of a gang rape of a young boy by 5 so-called child refugees. They beat the boy and dragged him into the forest where they raped him for over 1 hour. They even bit him. And what punishment do these people get, you ask? Well, in the wonderful country of Sweden, 4 of them, who claimed to be under 18, they got 1 year and 3 months, not prison, but youth care. That's right, not prison, but youth care. The 5th attacker got 1 year and 1 month, since he claimed to only be 16. In Sweden, if you're a refugee and commit a crime, you can claim to the court to be whatever age you want, and the court will take you for it. You can be an adult and claim to be 16, and they will believe you because they don't want to be labeled racist or anything like that. It's insane. There are many more horrible rape incidents in Sweden over the last few years, but it would take too long time to go through them all in detail. Other things I would like to mention are the extreme amount of hand grenade attacks in Sweden. The time when the migration crisis really hit Europe was around 2011-2013. As you can see on the chart on screen, in 2013 there were about 3 hand grenade attacks in Sweden. In 2016 it was 35. Notable incidents, for example this summer when an 8-year-old child was killed when a hand grenade was thrown through the window in the room he was in. That seemed to have been because of a Somali gang fight. Just after New Year, there was a hand grenade attack at a police station. Cars have been blown up by hand grenades, and grenades have even been thrown into random people's gardens. How is this possible? Hand grenades are military-grade weapons. I mean, this shouldn't be going on in a civilized first world country. This is the kind of thing that happens in Afghanistan or Iraq. Another issue that I think has gotten far too little attention is the arsons going on in Sweden. Over the last few months, I made lists of all the arsons going on, and it is a lot. It seems to be that cars are a favorite object for them to set on fire. Obviously, it is hard to know exactly who is responsible, but many happen in areas with a considerable amount of migrants, like Malmö, for example, which is the hotspot. Just a little example, in December 2016 alone, there were 199 cars set on fire or damaged by fire, and at least 56 containers were set on fire, and I can also mention there were 6 mopeds and 5 boats set on fire, amongst many other things. The list is quite big. So why is the Swedish government allowing this, and why is this being covered up so much? Well, the Swedish government has always been very left-wing. Even the so-called right-wing are actually very left-wing compared to other countries. I would classify the Swedish government as authoritarian socialist. Cultural Marxism is rife in Sweden. Imagine the whole of Sweden being like California, or to be honest, probably worse. Example of this madness, for example, is that so-called gender-neutral pronouns is being used by many journalists in newspapers and also used in court papers. This has been long in the making, and it was really kick-started by the far-left Prime Minister Olof Palme back in the 70s and 80s. The cultural Marxists have taken control of the schools and institutions in Sweden, and are now basically everywhere in the state apparatus. Sweden is swamped with cultural Marxists, and cultural Marxism, which was invented by the Frankfurt School, is a tool of the globalists who want a one-world government with no borders. Since the globalists don't want any borders, they are keen on importing migrants by the millions, specifically to Europe. And the cultural Marxists, which there are many of in Sweden, they all believe that certain people are more privileged than others, and that in true communist style they need to crack down on the privileged ones and promote the so-called oppressed. In other words, the most privileged in their worldview are Europeans, and specifically straight white men, whereas so-called minorities are the oppressed. So they are very happy with replacing the indigenous population of Europe with third world oppressed migrants. This sums up what is happening in Europe and Sweden quite well. There's much more to this, but that is beyond this video. But you can look up the Frankfurt School and cultural Marxism for more on this. This also answers the very simple question of why this is being covered up. It is being covered up on purpose because they have an agenda. It is all deliberate. If you are very right-wing in Sweden, or try to expose these issues, or go outside the so-called opinion corridor, there can be consequences in Sweden. Unlike the US, in Europe, there are no First Amendment, which means you don't have a right to freedom of speech. Certain speech, like so-called hate speech, is not very appreciated. If you speak up about migrant crime, etc. in Sweden, you risk getting reported for hate speech, which recently happened with a Swedish police officer who spoke out about migrant crime. More about him later. Dissenters are not liked in Sweden, and being a dissenter in Sweden means being right-wing. That's quite simple, simple as that. On a related note, one thing you might not know is that homeschooling is illegal in Sweden. Homeschooling is usually a right-wing thing, so of course that has to be banned from socialist Sweden. In Sweden, in true communist style, the children are supposed to belong to the state, not the parents. And to give an idea how things work, the consequences for breaking this law is quite severe. Basically, the state will take the children into foster care by force if necessary. In one case, with a child named Dominik Johansson, the police armed with machine guns separated him from his parents by force. Then he was put into foster care, where he's now been since 2009, I believe. In another case, the homeschooling family managed to flee Sweden before they could take the kids, but the state has been chasing after the family, trying to extort huge sums of money from them, even though they are in another country. This is how dissenters in Sweden are treated. So you may ask, what can be done to fix this? Situation in Sweden? Well, firstly, the people need to stop voting for far-left politicians. It is quite hard though when so many Swedish people have been brainwashed into voting for them. And to add, there are almost only left-wing parties to vote for. The only differing party is the nationalist party, which are the Swedish Democrats, but they're still quite left-wing when it comes to many issues, tax for example. They are, however, they are nationalist and anti-immigrant. I think the most important thing in order to get change in Sweden is breaking the lid of the censorship that the media has. US media are not nearly as bad, but Trump is doing to the mainstream media what really needs to be done to the media in Sweden. Get the real truth out there and start reversing the brainwashing that so many Swedes have endured for so long. And I think we're starting to see improvements here, but there is still much to be done. If Sweden continues on its current route without change, I think in maybe 10 to 30 years, Swedish people will start becoming a minority in their own country, and subsequently Sweden will turn into a third world country with massive amounts of rape, crime, breakdown of basic services you would expect in a civilized country. In fact, we're already seeing this in some places as parking officers and snowplowers refuse to work in some no-go zones. A UN report has already said that Sweden will be a third world country by 2030. That is a sad reality of what is happening in Sweden. But I will leave you with a bit of hope and good news. More and more people are beginning to wake up to what is happening. Recently, a Swedish police investigator named Peter Springare spoke out about migrant crime in Sweden and how migrants are extremely overrepresented when it comes to crime. He put it out on a Facebook post, and he has received major attention and overwhelming support from the public, much more than I expected actually. Someone set up a Facebook group to support him, and has now has now over 200,000 supporters, which is way more than what Stefan Löfven, the Prime Minister, has. And it has caused a major public debate in Sweden actually, and perhaps it could be the trigger for the start of change. I did make a very good YouTube video about this, and so I will show you some clips from my video here on screen now. Could this be the start of a patriotic spring in Sweden? Recently, a Swedish police investigator, and I will add a hero and a patriot, named Peter Springare, took to Facebook to vent out his frustration over the situation regarding migrants, crime, and the collapse of social and public services in Sweden. This Facebook post might just have been the trigger for change and a patriotic spring in Sweden. It has received major attention in Sweden and has opened the floodgates for discussing the previously unthinkable, debating the politically incorrect issue of migrants in Sweden. Even Swedish state-owned media, where 8 out of 10 working there votes for the far-left Green Party, or perhaps I will call them neo-Bolsheviks, because that's in essence what they are. Even they have been forced to talk about this issue. A political commentator named Marcus Oskarsson, who has worked as a correspondent for amongst others The Times and the Daily Mail, has said this could potentially change the outcome of the next general election, in other words for the anti-immigrant Swedish Democrat Party. So with that said, I will read you Peter Springare's now famous Facebook post. Here on screen is the post translated with the automatic translation function that Facebook has, but I have translated the original Swedish myself into English, and that is what I'll be reading to you. Here we go. Quote, I'm so, expletive deleted, tired. What I'll write here below is not politically correct, but I don't care. What I'm going to peddle to all you taxpayers is forbidden for state employees to peddle. It results in lost career and withheld individual salary, even though it is true. I don't care about all this. I will anyway soon retire after 47 years in this business. I will now, and every week henceforth, explain in detail what work I do as an investigator/investigator leader of the Serious Crime Unit at the police in Örebro. It will not be harmonious with BRÅ or other leftist criminologist perception in the general discourse. Our pensioners are on their knees. School is a big chaos. Healthcare is an inferno. The police has totally collapsed, etc., etc. We all know why, but nobody dares or wants to peddle the reason, because Sweden has always lived on myth of being the prude, ultimate society that has insane resources to always be at the forefront when it comes to be the only politically correct alternative, in a dysfunctional world that pulls knots on itself through destructive behavior in the names of different religions. Here we go. This is what I have handled Monday to Friday this week. Rape, rape, serious rape, assault rape, extortion, extortion, blackmail in court, illegal threat, assault against police, threat against police, drug offenses, serious drug offenses, attempted murder, rape again, extortion again, and assault. Suspected perpetrators: Ali Muhammad, Mahmoud, Muhammad, Muhammad Ali, again. Christopher, what, is it true? Yes, a Swedish name managed to sneak in on the outskirts of a drug offense. Muhammad, Mahmoud, Ali again and again. Countries that represent the crimes during the week: Iraq, Turkey, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria again, Somalia, unknown country, Sweden. Half of all the suspects we cannot know for certain because they don't have any valid papers, which often means they lie about their nationality and identity. Now we're only talking about the municipality of Örebro, and these crimes take up 100% of our investigations. This is what it has looked like for the last 10 to 15 years. I will return next Friday with a statement for the previous week." Unquote. Wow. That was really something. And this has hit home big time in Sweden. Almost all of the police in Sweden who are dealing with this situation on the front lines agree with Peter Springare. Here is another police officer that has come out with support. Oskar Talleryd writes, quote, "I work myself as a police in Stockholm. Springare speaks the truth. What he is saying is not an exaggeration or a lie. It is my daily life. It is many police's daily life. That we cannot talk about, that interviews with translators is more the rule than exception is sad. That we cannot talk about that second-generation immigrants from the Middle East and Africa are extremely overrepresented when it comes to serious crime is sad. How can there ever be an improvement if this gets hushed down? Should you, the public, get a serious insight with regards to these questions, you would be shocked. You would believe it all to be a lie. / Oscar, police in North Stockholm." Unquote. In other words, what this police officer is saying is that the situation in Sweden is so bad that if the police actually went out and told them, it would be so bad that the public might have a hard time believing them how serious the situation actually is. Many people, though, have known this from before. It seeps through, you cannot suppress the truth forever. The reaction from the public to this whole thing has been that of overwhelming support of Peter Springare. A Facebook group set up in support of him has gotten almost 150,000 supporters in just a few days. It is now one of the biggest Facebook groups in Sweden and has more followers than Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven. Meanwhile, another Facebook group set up to not support Peter Springare only has about 200 supporters. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this, and I hope this has given you a better understanding of what is going on in Sweden. Let's make Sweden great again.